Hi, welcome to my first lecture on the French defense. The French defense is actually named after a correspondence match between the cities of London and Paris in 1834. The French defense starts out, it's a king's pawn opening, so it starts off e4 and then c6, whoops, and so the idea behind this e6 move is that black now plans to play d5 and hopefully maintain a pawn in the center. But what black is going to give up is what we call space, meaning basically when you have more space you have more room for your pieces to move. So white will have more space and black will have less space. So here in my previous lectures I covered where black fought toe-to-toe with white in the center, and here black's going to try to maintain a pawn in the center but going to give something up, so getting something or giving up something to get something. So the moves usually continue in the French defense. d4, this is played like 90% of the time, and then black then plays d5, which is played almost all the time. I think it's like 98%. So just to cover my notes, the French defense, e4, e6, like I said, black is going to maintain a central pawn in return for space advantage, and these moves d4 and d5 are played like 90, almost 90, and almost 100% of the time. So what are the ideas for white? Or let me scroll down to the ideas. Well, white's ideas are I do want to say that this isn't the normal pawn structure that arises in the French defense. Usually what happens is that what will happen in the game is this pawn, this E pawn, will end up here. I just needed for illustration to point out the basic ideas of the French. So as you can tell, the pawns are sort of locked up. This is what we call closed center. I covered that before. White has a space advantage over here on the king's side. Okay, and then but black has a space advantage or more space over here. So what are the ideas for white and black? Well, the ideas for white are a kingside attack. Why? Because white has more space over there. And also, there's a rule of thumb in chess that says attack in the direction that your pawns are pointed. So here, white's pawns are sort of pointed in this direction, and black's pawns are pointed in this direction. So that says that if you need something to get your plan, this sort of says, okay, white's pawns are pointed on the king's side, so he should attack there. Black's pawns are pointed on the queen's side, so black should attack there. That's what we have. So white's idea is attack the king's side, defend d4. If you don't know, this will become a very critical square. So attack king's side, because that's the way the pawns are pointed. Defend d4. And then possible, these aren't always true for the French defense. It depends on which way you go. But a lot of times, or maybe not a lot of times, but sometimes this bishop here on f1 will come to d3 and then sort of eye this f7 square. And sometimes white can get a mating attack out of sacrificing itself after black is castled. Sometimes white can take this pawn with check and then get a mating attack, which then black always has to be careful of this. And the other idea is that white may end up defending the e5 square by moving with the move f4, and then this will support that. So just another common idea. These are two ideas that also pop up. How about for black? Well, black's ideas are, I've already mentioned before, attack on the queen side, because that's where it has the most space. And then its idea is to attack d4. So white's going to have to defend d4, black's going to have to attack d4. And it usually attacks d4 by playing moves c5, so it'll attack this way. It'll play the other moves will make. After it moves this pawn out, it'll black will move its knight here, which will attack d4. And also after the pawn move, this pawn moves, black will move the queen to b6 a lot of times and attack d4. Whoops, somehow that got messed up. Oh, attack d4. See, I have play c5, which is just up here. Possible is playing f6, attacking this pawn on e5, but that's usually only occurs after castling. In some lines it does occur before, but it's recommended that you castle first before you move f6. And then, if you don't know, the problem with the French defense is this bishop right here. It's blocked in by this pawn right here. It can't really get out and free. Okay, and this pawn here also sort of helps stop it, because if you think about it, even if it moves, the bishop were to move to here, you know, thinking it's going to take some line like down here, it's still blocked in. So the problem with the French defense for black is that this bishop right here is sort of trapped. It may be trapped for a long time. Okay? Now let's discuss some of the various variations for the French. So let me back up and move, because the first variation we're going to cover is the exchange variation. So what white's going to do is simply exchange so when black moves, so though this was the last move, or we're at this stage, white is just going to take the pawn. This variation is actually considered inferior for this reason, even though I would say keep it in your repertoire if you don't like the French as white. Meaning, what happens is that if you don't like, now the game is sort of half open, meaning it's not a closed game, and where white would get an advantage with moving the pawn to e5 and sort of you know, in this pawn for, you know, or the bishop is still hemmed in because black has a pawn here. But what happens is that white got rid of all that with his move. So basically what white did is, instead of me having him keep his small advantage of having black cramped and this bishop over here sort of pinned in, he got rid of all that. But what he got was basically some white players, or people that play white, don't like the French defense because it has all these unique ideas and concepts, and they may get into a problem, so they prefer just to sort of say, okay, I'm going to play a semi-open game and not the French defense. And if that's your philosophy, then that's fine. So the open variation usually continues. I'd recommend putting your bishop now in d3. We sort of covered this. In other lines, I wouldn't recommend this. And then basically what's going to happen is that black's development is going to usually almost mirror white's. So black would probably play bishop to d6. And then what happens is now that white probably wants to get its knight here. And to avoid the pin, I usually like to play h3, even though most people would probably not like me to say that, but I want to avoid the pin. So most players would consider my next recommendation move h3 probably not good play. But I do it for the simple fact that I plan the castle king side, and I don't want to have this pin going on. So what happened is that now black will play knight f6. Technically I could pin the knight, but I'll develop, and then we'll probably both castle, and then black will probably play h6 to avoid the pin too. So just want to let you know it's actually a continuation line. So My h3 has been played by masters, not recommended by the computer. Usually sort of not recommended by how many people have played it by masters, but it is definitely playable. And this game will continue. A lot of times White will try to get the knight, will develop it to c3, or will play the pawn to c3 and bring the knight to d2. So as you can tell, this looks much like some of the open games that we've studied before. Well, I'm going to have to continue this lecture in the next segment.